I want to tell you about a specific kind of financial failure, one that is far more common and far more painful than the obvious kind. The obvious kind involves recklessness, poor decisions, clear mistakes, errors that most thoughtful people would recognize in advance. That kind of failure is tragic, but at least understandable. The kind I want to talk about involves discipline, doing exactly what you were told, following the rules, being responsible, acting precisely the way every personal finance book, every advisor, every successful seeming acquaintance told you to act, and arriving, after 20 or 30 years of faithful execution, at a financial position that is meaningfully worse than it should be, not because you were careless, but because the rules themselves were wrong. I have spent 84 years watching this happen. The rules that cause the most damage are not the obviously bad ones. They are the ones that sound so reasonable that questioning them feels reckless. They are the common rules, the ones everyone repeats, the ones that travel from podcast to dinner table to earnest conversation between people who genuinely want to help each other. I am going to walk through 5 of them today. Let me introduce you to David. He is 51 years old, an accountant at a mid-sized firm in Nashville, Tennessee. 23 years in the same profession. He reads personal finance articles on Sunday mornings. He has followed the standard rules with genuine discipline his entire adult life, and as of this year he has significantly less to show for it than the math should have produced. David did not make obvious mistakes. He made the right things. If this sounds like a conversation worth finishing before the next financial decision gets made, subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. What we discuss here is not what sounds responsible. It is what actually works. The first rule that destroys financial stability while sounding completely reasonable: diversify everything. Diversification is treated as an unambiguous virtue. Spread your money across as many assets as possible. Never concentrate. The more diversified, the safer. I have a different view held consistently for 84 years. Diversification is protection against ignorance. It makes complete sense for the investor who genuinely does not know which businesses are excellent. For that investor, broad diversification through a total market index fund is the correct and honest approach, and I mean that sincerely. But the rule becomes destructive when applied universally, including to people who have genuine knowledge of specific businesses. David spent 23 years reading financial statements as a professional. He understood deeply the economics of 2 or 3 industries where he had real analytical expertise. The common rule told him, do not concentrate. So instead of building meaningful positions in the businesses he genuinely understood, David spread his savings across 47 holdings. Some he knew thoroughly, many he had researched only superficially, and several he chose primarily because a diversification framework said he needed sector exposure. 23 years later, his portfolio returned approximately what the broad market returned, because he effectively owned a complex version of the market, while spending hundreds of hours on research that produced no benefit over simply owning an index fund from the beginning. The rule is not wrong for most investors. It is wrong when applied as a substitute for knowledge rather than as a response to its absence. If you genuinely understand 3 businesses deeply, concentrate meaningfully. If you do not have that knowledge, and there is no shame in that, own the market through an index fund and stop pretending that superficial research across many companies is real diversification. The second common rule: buy the dip. This phrase has infected financial culture at every level. Markets decline. Commentators announce the opportunity. Buy the dip. The market always recovers. Be greedy when others are fearful. That last phrase is something I have actually said, in a very specific context. Let me tell you what that context is, because most people have taken it to mean something it does not. Being greedy when others are fearful applies to the investor who has done the analytical work to understand what a business is actually worth, the intrinsic value that exists independently of what Mr. Market offers on any given day. When a business you have analyzed thoroughly, whose competitive position you understand deeply, is offered to you by a panicking market at 50 cents on the dollar, yes, that is the moment to act. It does not apply to buying assets you do not understand simply because their price has declined. A price decline is not a signal of value. It is a signal that other participants are selling. Sometimes they are selling irrationally. Sometimes they are selling because they understand something about the business that you do not. The common rule cannot distinguish between those situations. It says, buy the dip. Always. David bought the dip in 2020. Technology companies researched over 2 weekends. Energy companies he had never analyzed. Positions in sectors he had no expertise in. All because the charts showed declines the rule said to exploit. Some recovered. Some did not. The aggregate result was approximately what the market returned anyway, because David had bought a random selection of declined assets rather than assets he had genuine analytical basis for believing were undervalued. Buying the dip is not a strategy. It is a description of an action that is either brilliant or disastrous, depending entirely on whether you understand what you are buying. Without that understanding, it is speculation wearing the costume of contrarian wisdom. The third rule. And I want you to stay through this one because the mathematics will change how you see a decision most people make once in their lives. Your home is your most important investment. This rule is stated with such confidence in so many conversations that questioning it feels almost reckless. Of course, real estate appreciates. Of course, building equity builds wealth. Here is the honest arithmetic on David's house in Nashville. Purchased in 2003 for $280,000. Current value, approximately $600,000. That sounds like exceptional performance, more than doubling in 22 years. Now add what the rule never includes. Property taxes over 22 years, approximately $85,000. Homeowners insurance, approximately $40,000. Maintenance, repairs, and capital improvements. 2 HVAC systems, a roof, kitchen renovation, various repairs, approximately $110,000. Mortgage interest on a 30-year loan, approximately $190,000. Total cost beyond the purchase price, $425,000. David paid $280,000 to buy the house and $425,000 more to own it for 22 years. Total investment, $705,000. Current value, $600,000. On a full accounting basis, the house lost money. The same $280,000 invested in an S&P 500 index fund in 2003, with the equivalent annual costs reinvested rather than paid to maintain a property, would be worth somewhere between $1.4 and $1.8 million today. David's home provided shelter, which has genuine value. It did not provide investment returns. The rule that told him it was his most important investment cost him the mental model that would have let him see the difference. The fourth rule is the one I consider the most silently destructive of all 5, and the one I want you to hear completely. Never carry debt. This sounds unassailable. Debt is bad. Eliminate it before investing. Live debt-free. I understand the emotional appeal entirely. Debt feels like a burden. Eliminating it feels like freedom. Here is the examination this rule deserves. Not all debt is equivalent. The relevant question is never whether you carry debt. It is what the cost of that debt is relative to what your capital could earn elsewhere. This is a mathematical question, not a moral one. David had a mortgage at 3.25% in 2020, a historically low rate, locked for 30 years. He had $30,000 in savings that the common rule told him to apply toward the principal. Paying down mortgage principal at 3.25% earns a guaranteed 3.25% return on that capital. The S&P 500's historical average is approximately 10% annually. Over 10 years, $30,000 in an index fund at 10% becomes approximately $77,000. Applied to a 3.25% mortgage, that same $30,000 saves approximately $9,750 in interest. David followed the common rule. He paid down the mortgage. The cost of doing so, approximately $67,000 in foregone compounding over 10 years. Not a catastrophic loss, a quiet, invisible, completely preventable one, caused by a rule that felt undeniably responsible. The rule is absolutely correct when debt carries high interest rates. Credit card debt at 22% should be eliminated before any investing occurs. The guaranteed return of eliminating that debt exceeds any reasonable investment expectation. But when the cost of debt is meaningfully lower than a reasonable expected investment return, accelerating repayment is a financial decision that feels responsible and produces a measurably inferior outcome. The fifth rule is the subtlest, and perhaps the one with the largest cumulative cost. Upgrade your lifestyle as your income rises. This is rarely stated as a rule. It is treated as obvious, natural, expected. You earn more, so you spend more on housing, transportation, food, travel, experiences. You deserve to enjoy the progress. David's income grew from $68,000 in 2001 to $142,000 today. His lifestyle expanded with nearly every income increase. Larger home, newer cars, more travel. Each upgrade felt like a deserved reward. What David did not calculate, the $40,000 per year he spends above his 2001 lifestyle, invested at 10% for 23 years, would be worth approximately $3.5 million today. Not theoretical future wealth. Wealth that could exist right now. Every dollar of permanent lifestyle expansion is a dollar that cannot compound. And the compounding that does not happen in your 40s and 50s is the compounding that would have been most powerful, because compounding accelerates as the base grows. This is not an argument for deprivation. It is an argument for defining a lifestyle ceiling before your income reaches it, and then holding that ceiling as income grows, directing the surplus to compounding rather than consumption. The investor who defined enough at $60,000 of annual spending and then began earning $140,000 builds wealth at an extraordinary rate. The $70,000 difference between income and enough goes directly to financial freedom. The investor who continuously redefined enough upward as income rose may save almost nothing, despite earning twice as much. Let me come back to David one final time. In the first version of his future, David continues following the 5 common rules. He diversifies without knowledge. He buys dips in things he does not understand. He counts his home as his primary investment. He pays down low-interest debt instead of investing. He upgrades his lifestyle with every income increase. He arrives at 65 with a portfolio that reflects 23 years of discipline pointed in the wrong directions. In the second version, David examines the rules. He narrows his investments to what he genuinely understands and uses index funds for the rest. He stops confusing debt elimination with financial wisdom when the debt costs less than a reasonable investment return. He defines his lifestyle ceiling and holds it as his income grows, directing the surplus to compounding. At 65, the second David has something the first does not: options. The freedom to work because he wants to, not because the lifestyle he built requires it. The margin between what he earns and what he needs that makes every other decision easier. The common rules failed David not because they were malicious, but because they were incomplete. They optimized for feeling responsible rather than for the outcomes responsible behavior is supposed to produce. The question worth asking about any financial rule is not whether it sounds right. It is whether, applied honestly over a full-time horizon, it produces what you are actually trying to build. Subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. The next video goes further into exactly how I evaluate financial decisions, not by how they feel, but by what they actually produce. Subscribe so you don't miss it. You have one financial life. The rules you follow without examination shape it more than almost anything else. Choose carefully which ones deserve that trust. This content is produced with the assistance of artificial intelligence for educational purposes only. Nothing here constitutes personalized financial advice. Consult a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions.